Today I'd like to give some writing advice for young writers, or in fact any beginning writer. I've been writing a long time, probably about 15 years, and there's definitely things that I wish I'd known sooner and things that I wish people had told me at the beginning. It's probably going to be a bit rambly. I haven't planned what I'm going to say, but I've got a few things in my mind that I definitely think are going to help you if you're a young writer or a beginner writer. Now, the first thing to say is that you definitely shouldn't listen to everything that you hear, including this video. So if there's anything in this that you think, nah, that's rubbish, then that's fine. You can just park it to one side. It's still worth remembering it so that you remember that you've ignored it and you don't have to worry about that thing again. And if maybe one day you do want to pull that piece of advice out of the drawer, it's there and it's ready. You might ignore something now and then later on think, oh, actually that's useful, I remember that piece of advice and I'm going to use that now. But the other thing I'd say is consume as much writing advice as possible. Watch videos about writing, read books about writing. I definitely recommend a book called How to Write by Harry Bingham. That book for me just completely blew everything wide open, because the thing that I always struggled with as a beginner was I'd write something and I'd think, this is pretty good. And actually, like, how did I know it was good? I had no idea. I didn't know what was good writing and what was bad writing. Sometimes I'd write something and think, this is pretty bad. And again, how do I know? I haven't studied writing enough to know whether it's good or bad. And once you start to really pick up on the things that generally are considered good writing and bad writing, it can really open things up for you, open a lot of doors and make things a lot quicker and easier. And of course, it's subjective. Something that you might think is really good, someone else might hate, and vice versa. But there's definitely a set of kind of guidelines that are really going to help you out, and patterns that all the most successful stories ever told follow to some extent. And that sort of brings me to my next point, which is that I think at the beginning I thought that writing was this kind of magic, strange thing. It's not like building a house or painting a painting. It's pure art and nothing's good or bad. It just depends on who's reading it. Writing is definitely an art, but there are ways of writing that are going to resonate with a bigger audience, and definitely ways of writing that's gonna not resonate with so many people. Things like having really compelling characters and really amazing locations and stuff like that. There are not necessarily right and wrong ways of doing it, but ways that are going to be considered more successful than others. And that's definitely a real thing. It is a craft at the end of the day. We know when we look at a table, whether it's a good table or a bad table, if it falls over all the time, then it's not a good table. Obviously, something like a painting, some people might think that a painting's really good and some people might think it's really bad. I'd say that writing is somewhere between a painting and a table. A lot of what makes up a story is very ingrained in us from the time when we used to sit around a campfire as cave people and tell stories to each other. This is something that's been really handed down, and there are definitely kind of patterns, rights and wrongs. You don't have to obey them, and in fact it's good to break the rules as long as you're doing it for a reason and you know what those rules are in the first place. When you're starting out, and this was definitely true for me, the most important thing was the idea. So I want to come up with a really good idea for a story. I want to think of the most original, amazing idea and write it as a story. And that is really important. But what I didn't think about was that actually what's more important is the writing itself. You could have an amazing idea and write it, and it just turn into a load of rubbish because you didn't write it well. Or you could have a very simple idea that isn't even necessarily very original and write it in an amazing way, and that will be much better than the brilliant idea that was written badly. Concentrate on the writing. And you've probably already noticed a kind of theme to this video is really, really try and hone down that craft of writing. I see this in beginners all the time, where they're concentrating on what the characters look like and what the world looks like and what the kind of social system is of the world that they're building and stuff like that. And that is important, but nothing is as important as that writing. The actual words, the sentences and the scenes that build up the book. Really focus in on that. And the best way to do that is to write. Try and write every day. If you can't, don't beat yourself up about it. But try and write something every day, even just a small paragraph of text, because that's all going to be practice. If you're learning to play piano, it's a good idea to play a bit of piano every day. Every single time you sit at that piano and play something, you're developing your fingers, you're developing your brain and your kind of muscle memory, and you're developing that skill, and writing is just a skill like any other. And the best way to kind of fuel your writing is to read. Read as much as you can. Read all kinds of different books. Read fiction, non-fiction. Read books that you wouldn't normally read. Read books that are different to the sorts of books that you want to write. And read books that are the same as the sorts of books that you want to write. Read short stories. I used to think that the more stuff I put in my head, then the more I'm sort of pigeonholing myself to write in a certain way. But it's not. It's like you're filling up a drawer full of all kinds of bits and bobs and tools and little bits of material, and you're going to be able to open that drawer whenever you want and pull out all the different bits that you want for this particular story that you're writing, and it's all there waiting for you. And it's not that you're copying, it's just that you're taking tiny little snippets of inspiration from a little bit from that book. Maybe you liked the particular way that a character was angry in that book, and maybe there was a shop in that book that you thought was cool for whatever reason, and you're going to use that same reason for a library in your book. And you just kind of get all these little bits of information just coming into your head, and you're not even aware of it a lot of the time. So maybe that example that I just gave about a shop and a library, you read about this shop in one book, and now you're going to sit down and write about a library in your book. You might not even remember that you read about that shop, but you're writing about this library, and it's starting to flow, and you don't even necessarily know where it's coming from, but your subconscious is kind of giving you this because it remembers when you read about this really mysterious shop in this other book, and you're using that same feel, that same mysterious feel for yours. You're not copying anything. It's not even a shop what you're writing about, but you've taken that little bit of inspiration. And that's just one piece of inspiration, the shop thing. The more you read, you're going to have thousands of these tiny little snippets of information, and it's going to really help you to write. Can you imagine trying to write a song on the piano if you'd never heard any piano music before? You might be able to. You might write something amazing. There's certainly been deaf composers, but even those composers, I bet, saw music written down on a page and had an idea of what music was. It would be very hard to write a piece of music if you didn't know what music was. And similarly, it's going to be really hard for you to write if you don't know what writing feels like. And you're going to make your life a lot easier if you've done lots of reading. Now I'm going to give some really specific stuff that really helped me, because I remember, again, I had no idea whether what I was writing was any good or not. And there were certain things that I got told along my writing journey that really blew my mind, and I thought, of course I need to do that. And the first one is, and you're going to hear this all the time if you watch videos or read books about writing, is conflict. You must have conflict in your story. So this is when, usually when someone's trying to achieve something and they can't because something is getting in the way, whether that's something inside themselves, a weakness that they have that's preventing them from getting what they want, or something external, baddies and ghosts and aliens and stuff, trying to prevent them from getting what they want. Conflict is key. You can't have a story without it. Imagine a story where there's a person who either wants something and gets it immediately, or doesn't want anything in the first place. It's not a story. Every story is about someone wanting something and trying to get it. If you've watched my videos, you'll know I say this all the time, and I know I sound like a broken record, but it's so important. You need a character who really, really wants something, and the conflict comes from the fact that they can't get this thing for whatever reason. Whether it's Frodo trying to drop the ring in the lava, or it's a romance about someone who really loves someone else. I would love to know in the comments if you've ever read a book where it wasn't about someone who wanted to try and achieve a certain thing. It would be really actually interesting to know that. Now, another really important piece of information that you're going to hear a lot, but I'm going to make sure I tell it to you now, is show, don't tell. When you're writing, don't just give me a list of what happened. Don't just tell me the events. Show me them unfolding. So don't just say she was angry, say that she slammed her fist on the desk and she was ranting and raving and kicking things and throwing things. That is you showing me that she's angry, and by telling me, it kind of ruins it, because I'm reading a book because I want you to kind of show me this experience, not just tell me this thing that happened. Another huge piece of advice that really helped me out was to, when you're writing a scene, don't just write a scene that's kind of this happened, and then you write another scene where this happened, and then another scene where this happened, and so on. Make each scene kind of knock into the next one, like a series of dominoes. So this scene happens, and because of that scene happens, that then means that this scene is now happening, and because that one happens, that now follows on that this thing is going to happen. And what you're going to end up with is a story that a reader can't put down, because every single thing that happens is important to the story, and it means that it propels the story and continues the story, and I need to keep reading because I need to see what the next conflict is and how it's going to get resolved. And the next thing that I would tell myself if I could go back in time is to self-publish. For the last 15 years or so, I've been trying to get traditionally published. This is where you find an agent, which is really hard to do, and then the agent finds a publisher, which is pretty hard to do as well. And if you're lucky, you're going to get published with quite a big publishing company, and you're going to be successful. It's really, really difficult to do that. People obviously do it all the time, but I've been trying to do it for a long time, 15 years as I say, and I haven't managed to do it. I got really close, and it just didn't happen. Now, of course, I didn't know that it wasn't going to happen. I always believed that it would happen, and maybe one day it still will happen. But if I'd have known now that by the time I'm the age that I am now, I wouldn't be traditionally published, I would have just self-published something 5 years ago, maybe more than that. I would have just got my name out there, and even if it wasn't particularly successful, at least there's maybe a handful of people who really do like what I wrote and want to read the next one, and then that would build up to the next one and the next one, and my work would then now be out there instead of where I am now, which is I've got no work out there, and I'm writing something now which no matter what happens I'm going to self-publish it. And it's really exciting to me that I know that this thing that I'm writing I am going to publish and people are going to read it. And even if it's only a few people, even if it's only my family and friends, I've written this thing and it's there and I can be proud of it that I wrote it. Whereas at the moment I've almost got nothing to show for it. I've sort of got the experience that I've built up. I have got, 5 or 6 books that I'm really proud of, but no one's really read them. They've never gone anywhere. And I should have just been brave and just self-published. It's so easy to self-publish. Write something with the aim of self-publishing it. Even if your dream is to be traditionally published, have something that you've self-published. I think it's a really important experience to go through, and I'm kind of yet to go through it, but I already can feel that it's going to be really valuable for me. Now please stick around while I'm just going to recap that really quickly, because I think it's really important. It all centres around taking in as much information as possible and putting yourself out there as much as possible. So read as much as possible. Read as many how to write books as possible. Watch as many how to write videos as possible. Write as much as possible. Have as many experiences, as many life experiences as you can. And don't be afraid to put your writing out there, whether it's on wattpad.com, which is where you can put stories on there, or if you're going to self-publish, start to build up a little name for yourself. I think it's a really good thing to do. I'm always available. If you want to ask any questions about writing or anything like that, just leave a comment. I'd love it if you could leave a like on this video if you liked it. Subscribe and hit the bell, because I make all kinds of videos that are designed to help you to learn how to write. And that's it. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.